All right, picture this for a second. You wake up way before dawn, and you grab a thick folder packed with your deepest, most existential questions, and you go stand in a bureaucratic queue. But you aren't waiting to, renew your driver's license or dispute a parking ticket. You are actually waiting to prove to a government official that your soul is real. Welcome to our explainer on the Heteronym Bureau. It's this brilliantly absurd, deeply profound piece of writing where the Portuguese poet Fernando Pessoa has been standing in exactly this line for 60 years. It's a world where human consciousness is literally subjected to administrative paperwork, and trust me, the results are completely fascinating.
Consider this quick rundown, your official Form 12G for our time together today. We'll start in the waiting room with our primary applicant, take a walk down the east corridor to meet his 3 alternate selves, face the threat of dissolution, peek behind a very mysterious 4th door, and finally, unmask the shape behind the glass. Section 1. Welcome to the Bureau, the place where ontological dissatisfaction goes to be processed.
So this bureau, it's an institution located on a street that doesn't quite exist on any modern maps. It's essentially where people end up when they suffer from ontological dissatisfaction. That sneaking suspicion that there might be other arrangements for their identity available out there. People show up bringing evidence of their fractured identities. Like, there's a woman who is an accountant by day and an ancient linguist by night. There's a guy whose shadow literally disagrees with his movements. And right at the very front of this queue is a number you absolutely cannot ignore: 60. Fernando Pessoa has been standing in this exact line, coming back week after week for 60 entire years, just trying to get an official update on his applications.
Section 2. The primary applicant, Fernando Pessoa, and his quest for official existence.
Let's take a closer look at Fernando. He's a man who always wears a hat, specifically to establish a relationship of, as he puts it, acknowledgement with reservations toward the sky. For 6 decades, he has asked the dark shape behind window number 1 for the status of his applications, only to hear the same thing, pending further investigation. But today is different. There's a new communication. But to get it, Fernando has to fill out Form 12G, the short version. And here's the punchline. The short version is 47 pages long. It's this brilliant piece of dark comedy, watching Fernando try to force the boundless, messy complexity of human consciousness into rigid little checkboxes. At one point, the form asks for his primary identity, defining it as the identity that remains when all others are stripped away. Fernando just writes, unknown, possibly none, possibly all simultaneously.
Okay, let's dive into this, because page 7 of the form asks Fernando to actually define what a heteronym is. He's given pages of blank space, and he uses it to explain this absolutely crucial distinction. A pseudonym, he writes, is just a mask. It's a pen name. The author knows they're wearing it. It's just a strategy. But a heteronym, that is a face. It arrives from the inside as a complete, independent self, with its own way of seeing the world, its own philosophy, and its own unique sensations. They aren't just pieces of Fernando. They are fully furnished rooms in a house he just happens to live in. Section 3. The 3 heteronyms. Meet the residents of the East Corridor. To actually find these heteronyms, we have to follow Fernando down the hidden East Corridor. The Bureau's architecture doesn't follow normal geometry at all. It kind of folds into itself to create extra space to handle all these complex souls. Down this hall, Fernando's 3 main alternate selves literally live in their own rooms, just waiting for their paperwork to clear. And this breakdown really highlights how distinct their minds are. First up is Alberto Caeiro, whose room looks out onto this impossible rural field. He represents pure observation without overthinking. Then we have Ricardo Reis, surrounded by a classical courtyard, endlessly refining these formal moral odes. And finally, there's Álvaro de Campos. His room sounds like a furious typewriter. He totally embodies sensation, velocity, and the loud, overwhelming crush of modern city life. So Alberto Caeiro states perfectly simply, the rain is rain. I mean, it sounds so simple, right? But it's actually a massive philosophical statement. Caeiro doesn't need to interpret the world or turn it into some deep metaphor. He doesn't suffer from this desperate need to officially prove his existence. When Fernando tells them the Bureau might actually dissolve them, Caeiro essentially just shrugs. He points out that the field in his window doesn't require a form to exist, and his observation of the field doesn't require a bureaucratic stamp of approval. He simply is. Now contrast that with Álvaro de Campos, and this brilliantly illustrates the desperate, high-energy desire to be seen. Álvaro feels the modern world at absolute maximum volume. He is furious, he's exhausted, and he is incredibly alive. When he hears they might be dissolved, he goes out into the city at night, just absolutely buzzing with existence, basically daring the Bureau to try and categorize the sheer velocity of his soul. He practically screams at the universe to give him a form large enough to hold his consciousness so he can fill it out.
Section 4. The threat of dissolution. The Office of Final Determinations sends a notice. The entire dynamic changes when a slip of really high-quality, heavy paper gets slid under their doors. It's a notice from a department they've never even heard of, the Office of Final Determinations. After 60 years of pending status, a hearing is finally scheduled, and the stakes here are frankly terrifying. Outcome 1 is confirmed, meaning they get their certificates of authentic selfhood. But outcome 2 is dissolved. If dissolved, the heteronyms are officially declared non-qualifying projections, and Fernando will be counseled regarding integration, meaning he'll be forced to absorb them and shrink his soul back down to a single, officially recognized size. And then there's the mysterious outcome 4, other.
The looming threat of dissolution sends Álvaro de Campos spiraling out into the night. Track this timeline with me. At 3 a.m., he notes how the city stops its daytime performance and just exists. By 3:45 a.m., the city starts subtly bracing for the morning, and at 4 a.m., standing right there on a bridge, Álvaro has a profound realization. Being alive at this overwhelming volume, feeling 40 distinct sensations at once, keeping going despite the crushing weight of the 20th century, actually, that is consciousness. That is exactly what makes him real, regardless of what some bureau stamp says.
Álvaro pulls out his chaotic notebook and makes this defiant list of what survives even if the Bureau dissolves them. Ricardo's odes are published. The Bureau cannot erase printed language. Caeiro's pure way of looking at the world, that's been taught to readers. It lives inside them now. Álvaro's velocity survives in anyone who reads his words and feels understood. Fernando will survive too, but as Álvaro notes, he will be left smaller, like a house practicing for emptiness. That is just such a heavy, incredible thought.
Section 5. The fourth door. Please do not prepare specifically for outcome 4.
The notification letter included a very strange instruction. It said, "Please do not prepare specifically for outcome 4," which, of course, is classic bureaucratic code, meaning you absolutely must prepare for outcome 4. Fernando remembers that at the very end of the East Corridor, past the 3 doors of his known heteronyms, there's a 4th door, a door without a visible name. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the dual mystery we are now faced with. Fernando asks the shape behind the frosted glass what is behind that door, only to be told the form to open it doesn't even exist yet. It's currently being designed by the people who found the door. And at the exact same time, we have the mystery of the chief assessor, the faceless judge who is supposedly going to preside over their final hearing. So Fernando realizes the Bureau's framework is just way too small. A 47-page form simply cannot hold his reality. So he sits at his desk at home with his blue pen, and he literally begins to design his own form. A form for the self that hasn't even been named yet. A form that doesn't ask for a neat little primary identity, but asks the real, messy questions about what it means to be a fractured, complex, beautiful human consciousness. He is creating the very administrative framework needed to recognize his own soul.
Which brings us to our final section. Section 6. The shape behind the glass. The Bureau after 5 p.m. So what actually happens to the Bureau after 5 p.m. when the doors lock and all the applicants go home? The building shifts, the lights dim, and that dark, procedural shape that has sat behind the frosted glass of window 1 for 60 years stays right there. And we finally learn who it is. The shape behind the glass is Bernardo Suarez. Now, if you know Fernando Pessoa's real-world work, this is a massive revelation. Bernardo Suarez is officially classified by the Bureau as a semi-heteronym. He isn't fully separate from Fernando. He's more like Fernando viewed through a slightly different, quieter lens. He is the author of The Book of Disquiet, which is a masterpiece of fragmented observations, and he has been sitting behind that counter this entire time. Think about this incredible double life for a second. By day, Bernardo is the bureaucratic assessor. He hands out Form 12G. He looks Fernando in the eye and tells him status pending. But by night, he sits at that exact same counter and writes his brilliant existential fragments. He notes that from the inside, the frosted glass is actually completely clear. He sees the applicants perfectly. He processes the very forms that define his own existence. So the crucial point is right here in this realization. Bernardo writes in his notebook,
I am the chief assessor. The entity judging the reality of Fernando's soul is literally just another piece of Fernando's soul. Bernardo is outcome 4. He realizes that the hearing won't be about confirming or dissolving the others at all. It will be about recognizing that this messy, multi-roomed structure of identity isn't a problem to be solved. It's actually the most accurate account of what consciousness really is. Earlier in the day, Fernando saw a blank piece of paper left behind by a strange childlike applicant. But when he looked closely at it again, 3 words were scribbled on it: keep filing anyway. Fernando and his heteronyms realized that the bureaucracy isn't delaying the real thing. All that endless filing, the questioning, the seeking of form, the looking deeply at the world, that is the investigation. And the investigation is the consciousness. We're going to leave you with this final thought today. If the forms we use to define ourselves are truly endless, is the messy, ongoing act of filing them exactly what makes us real? Fernando Pessoa stood in line for 60 years to prove he existed, only to discover that the very act of seeking the proof was the heartbeat of his soul all along. Thank you so much for joining me in the waiting room today. Keep filing.